Welcome to a battlefield of minds. Two grandmasters face off where every move cuts like a sword. One mistake, and it's over. This isn't just chess, it's war disguised as strategy. Let's dive in, move by move, into this epic clash. Ian opens with c4, a flexible spear probing Wesley's setup, hinting at complex strategic warfare right from the first breath of the battle. Wesley answers with nf6, a calm warrior stepping forward to challenge the center and signal that he's ready for any sharp confrontation Ian might ignite. Ian develops nc3, bringing another knight into the fray, tightening his grip on central tension while preparing for a flexible expansion on either wing. Wesley replies e6, forging a French-style barrier, locking down dark squares and preparing to strike back with perfect timing when the center explodes. Ian pushes e4 boldly, staking out more territory and forming a proud classical center, announcing that he seeks a direct showdown without hesitation. Wesley counters with d5, smashing into the center with brute force, testing Ian's ambitions and demanding immediate answers in this escalating duel. Ian thrusts e5 forward, chasing the knight and turning the center into a tense battlefield where every square feels ready to burst into flames. Wesley advances d4, hurling a pawn deep into Ian's camp like a dagger, seizing space and injecting chaos directly into the heart of the struggle. Ian responds with xf6, capturing with precision and opening dangerous lines, daring Wesley to recapture and walk into a storm of tactics. Wesley recaptures with dxec, scooping a pawn and wrenching open the queenside, preparing to use this newly torn terrain to launch counterplay. Ian plays bxt3, repairing the structure but sharpening diagonals, making his b-file and center buzz with tactical possibilities aimed straight at Wesley. Wesley captures with qsf6, activating his queen early like a venomous viper, eyeing weaknesses and pressuring Ian to defend with utmost accuracy. Ian pushes d4, taking more central space and building a proud pawn phalanx, hoping to shatter Wesley's early queen activity with raw presence. Wesley answers f5, hitting the center again with aggressive intent, using energetic pawn play to carve out dynamic squares for his pieces. Ian brings nf3, developing smoothly while shielding his king, ready to meet Wesley's pressure and keep the central storm under his control. Wesley improves n6, adding another fighter to the front line, preparing to contest every key square and turning the board into a tactical powder keg. Ian develops bj5, unleashing pin pressure on Wesley's knight like an archer drawing his bow, threatening to destabilize Black's kingside formation. Wesley responds qg6, sidestepping danger while aiming at Ian's sensitive points, a sly maneuver that keeps initiative and menace alive. Ian pushes d5, kicking the knight and seizing extra central territory, turning Wesley's position into a maze that demands flawless navigation. Wesley counters knight, retreating but resetting resources, a cold and disciplined step back before future counterstrikes that may flip the battle. Ian advances h4, sending a flank pawn like a raging scout charging forward, signaling intentions to chase Wesley's queen off balance. Wesley plays h6, halting Ian's pawn storm and drawing a line in the sand, ensuring his kingside doesn't crumble under early aggression. Ian brings b3, redeploying his bishop to a vital diagonal, reinforcing the center while eyeing expansion against Wesley's developing pieces. Wesley replies in even, fortifying his camp and rerouting the knight toward more active battlegrounds, strengthening the tension everywhere. Ian pushes Hive, lunging forward to harass the queen and intensify kingside pressure, forcing Wesley to react to this relentless advance. Wesley shifts Qn6, finding safer ground in the center, while maintaining threats, like a commander calmly repositioning to control crucial lines. Ian develops bd3, reinforcing key squares and preparing to castle, quietly building harmony as the board brims with imminent conflict. Wesley answers b7, finally completing a critical link in his defense and preparing to castle, showing readiness for long-term warfare. Ian places nd2, pulling the knight back to reorganize his forces, aiming to support central breaks and keep Wesley guessing about upcoming plans. Wesley counters nf6, returning the knight to an active square, as if stepping back into the ring, ready to clash directly with Ian's central ambitions. Ian pushes f3, building a sturdy pawn chain and shutting down Black's counterplay, like constructing a solid barricade before launching bigger operations. Wesley castles, whisking his king to safety, and finally connecting his rooks, signaling that the middle game fireworks are officially ready to begin. Ian jumps Nefua, shoving a knight into enemy territory with confidence, slicing into central squares, to pressure Wesley's tightly coiled formation. Wesley responds Nick c4, trading decisively to reduce Ian's aggressive posture, as if removing a spearhead before it gains unstoppable momentum. Ian recaptures fc4, opening lines and sharpening central tension, turning the e-file into a dangerous highway filled with tactical opportunities. Wesley drives k3, thrusting the queen deep into enemy territory like a cold assassin, targeting weaknesses around Ian's queenside. Ian plays qb3, challenging the invader and sealing key squares, determined to push Wesley's queen back before further chaos unfolds. Wesley retreats k5, keeping pressure from a distance, maintaining a venomous presence while repositioning for future tactical strikes. Ian continues b2, quietly developing while shielding vital diagonals, preparing his king for safety amid the swirling complications. Wesley activates bc5, slicing across the board with his bishop, turning its diagonal into a laser beam pointed straight at Ian's vulnerable center. Ian answers bd2, reinforcing his queenside and connecting his rooks, tightening coordination as the battle shifts fully into the middle game arena. Wesley strikes 5, breaking open the position aggressively, testing Ian's structure, and looking to unleash a wave of powerful piece activity. Ian responds rfone, pulling his rook to the key file, gearing up for central duels and bracing for Wesley's energetic assault. Wesley pushes fc4, ripping open the center with force, inviting complications and forcing Ian to navigate razor-sharp tactical landscapes. Ian recaptures ax5, delivering a bold check that trades material while trying to disrupt Wesley's carefully coordinated defenses. Wesley captures back kx5, calmly restoring balance while centralizing his king, showing nerves of steel in the heart of chaos. Ian castles, launching his king to the queenside bunker, and announcing that he's ready for opposite-side attacks and all-out warfare. Wesley plays gate, tucking his king safely behind pawns, preparing for the brutal kingside storms Ian has yet to unleash. Ian activati affefoni, doubling pressure on the f-file, and aiming to reclaim initiative before Wesley's bishops and queen fully ignite. Wesley answers b-d7, aiming his bishop toward the queenside battlefield, while connecting his major pieces for a coordinated attack. Ian shifts k-bone, stepping his king from danger and completing his defensive grid, a necessary precaution before the board erupts further. Wesley fires qb6, placing his queen aggressively to pressure the weakened queenside, hinting that Ian as king may soon feel the heat of incoming fire. Ian shifts kaone, sliding his king deeper into the corner bunker, trying to stay out of the queen's crosshairs as the tension mounts sharply. Wesley brings her fight, activating the rook with lethal purpose, preparing to flood the f-file with threats that could tear open Ian's defenses. Ian traits Eric's fight, eliminating the rook and briefly easing the pressure, hoping material simplification will slow Wesley's rising momentum. Bet. Wesley answers Kia's fight, recapturing confidently and centralizing his king once more, turning it into an active piece ready for endgame combat. Ian captures qxsb6, exchanging queens to reduce danger, hoping that removing Wesley's most powerful attacker will stabilize the battlefield. Wesley replies xb6, repairing structure while opening the a-file, setting the stage for distant pawns to become decisive weapons later. Ian develops Bione, trying to coordinate his bishops and rebuild harmony, preparing to contest dark squares before Wesley overwhelms them. Wesley plays k7, marching his king boldly toward the center where it becomes a powerful leader, signaling the approach of the endgame. Ian continues kb2, activating his king and inching it toward central influence, hoping to meet Wesley in the critical zones of the board. Wesley plants ba4, placing his bishop deep in enemy territory like a spear, slicing lines toward Ian's fragile kingside and queenside structures. Ian develops bg4, repositioning his bishop to challenge activity and attempt to restrict Black's coordinated advance. Wesley counters bgon, swinging his bishop to a cutting diagonal, preparing long-range threats that creep into Ian's camp with silent menace. Ian plays bj3, stabilizing his kingside and eyeing counterplay, trying to chip away at Wesley's growing control. Wesley steps k6, driving his king forward with authority, turning it into a dominating force ready to escort pawns into battle. Ian pushes e3, opening lines and giving life to his bishop, hoping this structural change will offer chances to resist Wesley's tightening grip. Wesley answers b8, rerouting his bishop to a commanding post, preparing to launch pressure down key diagonals with surgical precision. Ian plays cajon, stepping his king closer to the center so he can challenge Wesley's advancing army in the looming endgame clash. Wesley continues bf2, placing the bishop aggressively to harass Ian's pieces and maintain control of the dark squares with unyielding force. Ian develops b8tb, trying to build a defensive web around his king and challenge the dark square domination Wesley is establishing. Wesley responds ba4, delivering a stinging check that forces Ian's king to shuffle and reveals the growing influence of Black's bishops. Ian retreats cajon, returning to safety but still struggling to break free from the relentless pressure Wesley imposes from every angle. Wesley calmly plays beyond, continuing a precise bishop dance, that tightens the positional noose around Ian's weakened structure. Ian brings kb2, attempting again to reposition his king into the endgame arena, searching desperately for safe footing amid the looming threats. Wesley strikes bh4, planting his bishop deep and menacing, tightening the grip on Ian's kingside while preparing to target weakened light squares. Ian answers g4, pushing the pawn forward like a desperate shield, trying to disrupt Wesley's coordination and gain breathing space. Wesley plays bf6, calmly retreating to a dominant diagonal, keeping every pathway covered and preparing to unleash further pressure. Ian steps Kakone, pulling his king inward again, searching for a stable square as Wesley's bishops continue weaving a web around the board. Wesley advances, kcf5, storming forward with his king, turning it into a fearsome general leading the charge in the decisive endgame. Ian pushes g5, launching a fiery pawn thrust to challenge Wesley's kingside control, hoping to distract the advancing black forces. Wesley responds, hxd5, snapping the pawn and opening lines toward Ian's king, increasing the danger and accelerating the collapse of White's defenses. Ian develops big-on, trying to restore order and block the diagonals, though Wesley's pieces still stand with overwhelming activity. Wesley activates bd7, shifting his bishop to a central hub, preparing to coordinate with his king and pawns for a crushing breakthrough. Ian captures bx3, trading pieces to ease the tension, hoping that eliminating one of Wesley's bishops will weaken black's hold. Wesley replies kd6, sidestepping the check and keeping his king aggressively centralized, radiating control over the critical battleground. Ian pushes kd2, bringing his king towards safety and central influence, attempting to stem the tide of Wesley's advancing forces. Wesley drives g4, ramming the pawn forward like a battering ram, cracking open White's kingside and clearing paths for his remaining attackers. Ian advances, h6, throwing forward a defiant pawn, trying to create counterplay before Wesley's pawns swarm through. Wesley captures gxh6, calmly accepting the pawn and preserving a dangerous passer that threatens to become unstoppable. Ian responds, bxh6, eliminating the dangerous pawn before it grows too strong, hoping this capture will slow Wesley's momentum in the collapsing position. Wesley plays bf5, placing his bishop on a dominating post, tightening the net around Ian's king, and preparing to escort his central pawns forward. Ian brings k3, stepping his king into the center with urgency, trying to meet Wesley's threats head-on before the endgame slips away completely. Wesley answers bh4, sliding the bishop into a slicing diagonal that targets Ian's weakened structure, keeping relentless pressure on every entry point. Ian retreats b5, trying to disrupt Wesley's coordination with a forcing check, hoping to buy crucial moments to reorganize his scattered forces. Wesley responds b7, calmly blocking the check and maintaining full control, showing no cracks as he neutralizes Ian's last tactical hopes. Ian repeats bh6, looking for chances to provoke inaccuracies or create zugzwang, trying to stretch the defensive resources in a fading position. Wesley counters bh4, returning to the bishop and reinforcing the bind, making it clear that he dictates the rhythm and flow of the endgame. Ian again tries b5, clinging to repetition attempts, searching desperately for a way to halt Wesley's perfect coordination. Wesley blocks with b7, refusing any concession and demonstrating precise endgame technique, closing every door Ian hopes to slip through. Ian presses bh6, repeating his only active plan. As he clings for counterplay, the Wesley's fortress remains unshaken. Wesley chooses cheeks, advancing his pawn to strengthen the center and prepare a decisive breakthrough, signaling the final phase of domination. Ian pushes dx6, capturing the pawn to avoid outside passers, but this exchange risks opening dangerous lines for Wesley's active king. Wesley recaptures bx6, forming a powerful pawn duo ready to march forward, sharpening the threats and edging closer to victory. Ian plays b5, repositioning his bishop to a defensive post as he braces for Wesley's advancing pawn wall and centralized king. Wesley steps k6, advancing his monarch with confidence, transforming it into a crushing force, ready to escort his pawns deep into enemy territory. Ian responds bg2, aiming for activity on the long diagonal, hoping to pressure Wesley's pawns or cause structural weaknesses. Wesley calmly places b6, centralizing the bishop to dominate the board, reinforcing key squares and giving black full positional command. Ian chooses bf6, trying to restrict Wesley's movements and challenge the pawn mass before it becomes unstoppable. Wesley answers b-bone, sliding his bishop to a remote vantage point, where it threatens long-range infiltration, adding a new layer of danger. Ian pushes a3, seeking counterplay and trying to open some breathing space on the queen side before the pressure becomes suffocating. Wesley plays e4, blasting open the center with a decisive thrust, transforming his pawns into lethal weapons, marching toward promotion. Ian retreats k3, stepping back to intercept the advancing pawn and defend the collapsing center with his last reserves of strength. Wesley continues k6, placing his king in perfect harmony with his pawns, preparing to escort them to victory with cold precision. Ian develops b8, trying to reposition the bishop for counterplay, though black's forces still dominate every critical file and diagonal. Wesley strikes k5, charging forward with his king like a conquering general, pushing Ian to the brink as the endgame approaches its final moments. Ian plays bxb, snatching the pawn on b6 to relieve queenside pressure, hoping this capture will give him a brief chance to breathe in the tightening endgame. Wesley replies bx3, striking back immediately and removing Ian's queenside pawn, opening new lines that threaten to unleash a crushing outside passer. Ian steps d2, dragging his king toward the center to block infiltration, trying desperately to patch holes as Wesley's forces tighten the noose. Wesley calmly places b6, centralizing the bishop to dominate key diagonals, locking down Ian's pieces and preparing for the final pawn storm. Ian moves b3, aiming to reinforce central squares and challenge black's advancing forces despite being pushed steadily backward. Wesley answers b4, sliding his bishop onto an active diagonal, where it menaces white's king and restricts Ian's remaining mobility. Ian pushes c5, gambling on counterplay with a passed pawn, hoping this final spark can distract Wesley's overwhelming army. Wesley counters bd3, maintaining perfect control, positioning the bishop to escort pawns and suffocate Ian's last remaining hopes. Ian retreats bone, trying to preserve his bishop and guard critical squares, though Wesley's pawn structure and king activity remain overwhelming. Wesley plays k5, marching his king deeper into white's territory like an unstoppable force, preparing to convert his massive positional edge. Ian responds bg2, seeking activity and trying to counter black's domination on the central files, though the threats grow more severe. Wesley continues bc4, anchoring his bishop on a dominant diagonal, slicing through the board and supporting the advance of his lethal pawn majority. Ian pushes bone, repositioning defensively once more, struggling to find any constructive plan as Wesley tightens control. Wesley strikes g3, advancing the pawn with explosive intent, tearing open white's kingside, and creating decisive mating and promotion threats. Ian plays bg2, regrouping his bishop to hold dark squares, but his defenses now stretch dangerously thin across the board. Wesley delivers b6, bringing his bishop back to a commanding position, ready to escort his pawns or deliver tactical blows at a moment's notice. Ian steps b6, placing his bishop in the path of black's advance, hoping to trade or stall Wesley's perfectly coordinated pieces. Wesley drives g3, pushing the pawn further with crushing momentum, transforming it into a deadly asset that white can barely contain. Ian retreats bg2, clinging to the last defensive diagonal, though Wesley's pawn structure and king activity remain overwhelming. Wesley answers b6, calmly recentering his bishop to support promotion and delivering the final positional choke. Ian plays bone, shuffling defensively in a last futile effort to resist, while Wesley's forces dominate every square. Wesley closes the game with b6, perfectly orchestrating the final blockade, and Ian has no escape. 0-1, a masterclass of cold, relentless endgame technique. The video ends here. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time. Please don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thank you again, everyone. See you in the next video.